I don't get a feel for the Giants right now. I have no idea what they're doing. The only thing I can say is that, the last couple of weeks, you start reading articles by guys that are covering the team, and they're talking about the general manager staying because he has the plan, and nowhere to be found is the coach's name in the article. And I feel like there's a separation between the two, and it has started over the last 2 weeks, and they're going to find themselves in a really weird situation because as I was looking over the list of quarterbacks, let's face it, they're not trading up to get somebody and giving up half their draft in next year's first round. I would not do that.
No.
Not for any of these guys. I mean, I think that they can play in the league. I just don't think that they're worth these high picks. No matter how desperate you are for a quarterback, go out and find somebody else. Go out and find a Carson Wentz. Go out and find a Kirk Cousins. Go find somebody that's going to be cheap and is going to be a stopgap and worry about next year or the year after that. I don't see anybody on this board right now that is worth what it would take to go up and get them, because people value that first or second overall pick because they feel like they need to fill a void at the most important position. And I know that there are guys that now, as we get ready to transition into the phase where we start evaluating and the NFL starts evaluating these players, I don't necessarily feel like there's an explosive player in the draft that is going to be a difference maker within the next 2 years. So let's just say they end up, getting Cam Ward somehow, some way. Is he going to be Jaden Daniels and C.J. Stroud, or is he going to be Anthony Richardson?
Right.
And is he going to be ready to play in an NFL game? Like, is he going to be able to read the NFL defenses that are so much different than the college defense?
All right, so that brings up an interesting point. Because the situation is what it is in the draft, and at the top of the draft, you don't even like the quarterbacks. And I think the consensus is this is not like last year.
No, it's not even close.
Right. So, all right, so you got that part of it. Now you have the part of it where the Giants may not even have an opportunity to draft those guys, even if they love them. Does the situation that they're in contribute to whether or not they stay or not? Meaning that if they had the number 1 overall pick and Caleb Williams were there, you'd be like, you know what? I want Brian Daboll and Caleb Williams to work together. I'm going to keep Brian Daboll. You understand what I'm saying? It's a little bit of
it's so complicated, and there's so many variables that go into the decision-making of John Mara in this situation because if they draft a young quarterback and somehow they get up to the number 1 pick or with the number 2 pick, and they are 0-7 next year, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, yeah, what happened to Matt Eberflus?
Exactly is what's going to happen. And, and I think we've definitely highlighted that and spoke about that. And, do you think that Brian Daboll wants to work in another young quarterback? And I know he wants to keep his job, and I know it's a job that, a million guys would love to have. But in reality, the losing takes its toll. And a guy like Brian Daboll, unfortunately, they're the fall guys. I've seen my friend go through it twice. So I know exactly what these guys put into it, how hard they work, and how shortchanged they are when their quarterback position is in a state of flux. And if you don't have that right guy, that difference-making guy that's at that position that you believe can run a team for 17 games and stand up and take the beating that is required in order to become one of the best in the league, I mean, you don't have a chance. And I did look at, who the Giants are playing next year.
Yeah.
I mean, they're playing the gauntlet of teams next year. It's ridiculous who they're playing. Now, every year is different. We know that. But at least on paper going into next year, I would sit here and tell you that we're going to see the Giants at the top of the draft again next year. So how are the fans going to deal with that?
Well, right. Think about it. Right. The only way that it's going to feel right that Joe Shane and Brian Daboll stay is if they draft a quarterback and the guy is great. You said the name before, Jaden Daniels. That's the only way it's going to feel right that they stayed, because all these other scenarios, I guess there's another one. There's another one that could happen I think is very unlikely.
If they trade for J.J. McCarthy, is that?
Well, right. They either get a guy like that or they bring in a stopgap guy that ends up being really efficient at that position.
Kind of like Sam Darnold this year or Baker Mayfield.
Right,
for
and then
Bucs.
the defense figures it out. Neighbors, maybe they draft another offensive weapon, and then all of a sudden they're a little more competitive.
Or they sign a free agent offensive weapon.
Right, but I don't see that happening, quite honestly.
I feel like I kind of feel like at the moment we're sitting here right now that they're in a dead end.
Yeah.
And they're at a dead end because, they sank or swam with Daniel Jones. They let Saquon Barkley go. He runs for 2,000 yards, becomes that gold jacket guy that Dave Gettleman said he was going to be. They've had numerous injuries, failures in the draft.
Yeah.
And it is, and I'm not, I want them to win. I want them to do well. It's easier for us to cover teams when they're winning. Like the Knicks right now, turn on the mic, start talking glorious about the Knicks and their 9-game winning streak and the fact that they're playing a team that's won 14 in a row, and you got yourself, a mid-season championship potential.
Yeah, it's funny you say the Knicks, because I was going to make that comparison to when all those years where they were in absolute NBA purgatory and closer to hell than anywhere else, where you felt like there's no way out. There's no way out. Like, all right, we have the one of the 3 worst records. Okay, you didn't get the number 1 overall pick. All right, you got this guy, and then all of a sudden you're too good to get one of the top picks, and then there's nobody in the draft, and then you draft this guy, and then he stinks, and then Giannis gets picked behind, and like there was no way out. You were stuck in one of these escape rooms with no escape, and then finally it happened after years and years and years. Feels like the Giants are in that situation right now.
100% it does, and because there is no leading answer right now for them. They do have some really good players on the roster. They do. When they're all healthy, there are some top-end players, and so it's not the void of total talent. But what it is missing, it's missing the playmaker at quarterback. And you can't sit here and tell me that Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, Jalen Milroe, Carson Beck, any of these guys that are coming out this year at this moment are the answer to a 9-win season next year. I mean, next year, if they have a rookie quarterback and people think he's going to play and turn this season or turn this thing around, they got another thing coming.
Yeah.
Let's look at reality here and try to figure out. Joe Shane is going to, if he is here, they're going to have to be really creative and really aggressive. And the reason being is because I could just hear it like in the middle of next season. They're 1-7. Oh, here we go again. This franchise, they suck. Get rid of the owner. Get rid of this. I mean, I could just hear it all over again.
Yeah, and then you put that quarterback in that horrible position that we've seen the Jets put a couple of guys in, where there's coaching changes, their offensive coordinator changes, there's everything, and then that's what you got with the Chicago Bears right now. And I don't know if they're going to hang on to the offensive coordinator that they promoted.
Oh, they're getting rid of those guys. They're cleaning house.
Right. So then now you're talking about a Caleb Williams going into his second season is going to have his 3rd offensive coordinator,
which is ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly. So that's something that you got to think about. If you draft that quarterback. Now, they're also going to have pressure on them to draft a quarterback like that. They might have to, because of where they are, just have to do it. Because how the hell, what's the alternative at this point?
It would have to be a stopgap guy, and
then what though?
You know what you do? You trade down and you get more assets, is what you do, and you be realistic about what you're trying to do here.
But do you do that with this regime or another regime?
But that's the point. I mean, this regime right now needs to win, and they're not going to win next year if you're telling me that they are going to draft reach for a quarterback in the first round and throw him out there week 1 in the NFL season.
Yeah, I mean,
you got to tell me,
no,
there is no Jaden Daniels. And by the way, we were watching offseason Hard Knocks. What player did Brian Daboll say go get?
Jaden Daniels.
Right. So he knows.
Yeah.
He knows better than we know. He knows better than all the fans out there know. He knows who the players are that he thinks he can win with, and he needs, whoever it is. I mean, can you see another season where they are picking 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th, 5th next year in the draft?
Of course. I mean, I think that's the most likely situation.
But I'm just saying, with this regime or this coaching staff.
Yeah. I mean, I'll
tell you what, if that's my hockey team, I want the coach out. I want him out. And hockey and basketball, they recycle coaches all the time. But I'm just football coaches, they're striving. These teams are striving for stability. I've always screamed about stability. But I know, I also know the realities of the business, and I know how fans react. Like, fans don't want to be told, hey, we're bringing back this group, but you know what? Next year, we're going to temper our expectations because Joe Shane has a plan for the next 3 years. And when you start adding up all the years and all the losing, do you think that the fan base, the season ticket holders, the sponsors, do you think that the business side of this football team is going to be a positive or a negative going into next season?
I mean, of course, it's going to be overly negative. And the Joe Shane part of it, I think, and we like him, we like Brian Dable, but the worst thing that's happened to the Giants has been those top picks at the draft by Joe Shane, like missing on Kayvon Thibodeau, Evan Neal, and Deonte Banks. I mean, those have been the biggest ones. Like, as much as I can't stand the Lions right now, you went through the picks that they made to build this team. That is how you build. Like, you hit on Aiden Hutchinson. You don't miss on Kayvon Thibodeau. You hit on Penny Sewell. You don't miss on Evan Neal. Like, I mean, it's just
they hit on Jahmyr Gibbs.
Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, now,
I will never forget when Jahmyr Gibbs, I think it was his second year at Alabama, and I'm sitting there with Coach Cowher in the NFL Today, and Coach Cowher goes, man, look at this kid. I love this kid. I'm like, I didn't see what he saw. I don't know what he saw. Like, I'm not a head coach looking at running backs, watching them, daily, day in and day out. But Coach is saying that just Jahmyr Gibbs is like Bijan Robinson, man. These two guys are unbelievable. And, he saw it, and obviously he would know better than I did. And, man, he was right on both of them.
Yeah. I mean, and also, like, Amon-Ra St. Brown, 4th-round pick. Wan'Dale Robinson. You think about these things. That is the difference.
Yeah, but I also...
Drafting well.
Well, I also think the difference, too, is, the Lions, I feel like, finally hit on a coach. They finally had this offensive coordinator that has turned out to be great. And talked to a number of people, and I've told you this last year about Ben Johnson's offense and how intricate and how great it is and how freewheeling it is and how good Jared Goff has become in it. Those things, it's taken time. They didn't get off to a great start, and it took time. But what did they do? They stayed with the veteran quarterback that went to a Super Bowl, that everybody was like, get rid of this guy. He can't win a Super Bowl. He took his team to the Super Bowl. And when it first started in Detroit, they thought that it was a bust. It was a bad trade. The whole situation was not great. And then all of a sudden, they started building around him. He started getting more comfortable in the offense. Players started making plays. They were devising an offensive game plan that is probably one of the best top 3 offenses in the league because of the way that it is designed, the things that the quarterback can do at the line of scrimmage, the things that Jared Goff actually brings to the game. He doesn't run with the ball. He stands in the pocket and delivers the ball to let his teammates run with the ball. They don't call running plays for Jared Goff. I don't know if you've noticed this.
Well, of course. Yes, I've noticed it.
So you can play the position like Jared Goff plays the position. Is there a player out there right now that could be Sam Darnold or Jared Goff for the Giants next year? Could the Giants add T. Higgins as a free agent? Could they sign a quarterback? And I'm going to throw out a name, and I'm going to keep throwing this name out until we see him this week. And I don't know if he's going to play any well. He hasn't played all year, but there's a guy that's young, there's a guy that's healthy, there's a guy that's athletic, and his name is Carson Wentz. Yeah, see, if I would have said that about Sam Darnold last year, you would have done the same thing.
Well, that's not true. I said he was going to have a good year.
Yeah, well, once you figured out what was going on, but everybody else out there would have laughed at Sam Darnold being their starting quarterback going to last season. You know that, and I know that.
But hold on.
And then, if I say that, if we would have said that about Baker Mayfield, after Baker Mayfield lost out to Sam Darnold in Carolina and went to the Rams, and in 2 days figured out an offense.
All right, there's a little bit of a difference. Because the main reason why I thought, there was 2 big reasons why I thought Sam was going to succeed. One was he sat an entire year there with Kyle Shanahan. And then 2, the environment. We're talking about a dome with all those weapons and an offensive head coach that proved that he could take any quarterback and win with it. He pulled Joshua Dobbs off the landfill and won 3 or 4 games with them the previous year. So he could do the Giants. They're not in anywhere near that type of situation. They've got one exciting offensive player. they've got an offensive line that is miserable.
Well, by the
they
way,
play in a hellhole outdoors, and they have sucked for the better part of the last decade. So, like, it's not a plug-and-play situation like it was. Like, the Vikings went 13-4 a couple years ago with Kirk Cousins. The Giants are in the basement every year.
Here's the deal. So Mekhi Becton was an injury waiting to happen, almost ate himself out of the league with the Jets. Now he's walking off the field with the Philadelphia, Eagles, crying because he's gotten his act back together and he's become a professional football player and he's become effective for them. Evan Neal has been an unmitigated disaster. And they're going to end up getting rid of him next year, and somebody will pick him up, probably move him to guard, and probably work his ass off, and he'll probably become a serviceable player because right now he's anything but that. But they tried so many different ways to fix this offensive line: free agency, trades, high draft picks. They've tried a million different ways, and it hasn't worked out for them. But then again, the quarterback hasn't helped either.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the problem that you have if you're a Giant fan and you sit here and you look at your coaching staff and you're like, okay, so next year we're going to be 1-7 with the same head coach. How are we going to be reacting to a 1-7, no matter who the quarterback is, because of their schedule next year? How are you going to feel about that? You're going to want the guy fired.
Well, yeah.
Now the question is there somebody that is in the coaching carousel right now that you think that is going to make your team significantly better just by his presence being on the sideline?
Vrabel's the only guy. Vrabel's the guy that I would be the most confident in now that Belichick's gone, which is amazing that this could have been the reuniting of those two guys.
That was the reason why Belichick was reaching out to teams, seeing whether or not there was any interest, and there was none.
It's crazy.
That is nuts. So he's got some sort of reputation within the NFL that just completely pulled everything that he's ever accomplished as a coach right out from under him.
I think he's exhausting, and I think that everything's got to be his way. And then people in those buildings, But listen, I'm just doing devil's advocate here. I'd love to have Bill Belichick as my head coach, but I think that owners are afraid of it. That's what I think. I think they're afraid of him coming in and it being his team. And then Bob Kraft, who knows what he's saying about him behind closed doors to his other owners.
6 Super Bowls.
Though that there's some weirdness going on. There's some weirdness going on in there.
I'm not saying that he's not weird. Every football coach is weird.
No. I'm saying with the Kraft-Belichick relationship. Mm-hmm. You saw it in that documentary.
Yeah, I know that. I know. And then, why did Tom Brady leave and everything else? I know. The Giants are stuck. Joe Shane better be creative. If they want to have a half of a chance next year, and I don't who is the guy? Who is the guy that's going to be standing behind center?
No idea. It's either going to be the guy that they drafted, which I thought was going to be a lock until they won last week,